Number one, thank you guys for coming. I'm going to kick Michael and Sam for having me at the last part of the day, because as a former person who used to live in Houston, I know getting out of downtown is a high priority at this time of day. So I appreciate you guys sticking around. I will try to make it informative and as interesting as possible. So we titled this Agent Smith 2.0 in AI Deception. And the reason I chose that title is, when we were thinking about the challenges that are happening with AI right now, it was, we've talked about it a lot. So, in 68, we had HAL with 2001 Space Odyssey. And then 83, we had the Whopper out there with War Games that you see in the lobby there. And then in 84, we had Terminator. And then in 1999, we finally arrived at the Matrix, right? And so the Matrix, all of our AI experiences are, oh my gosh, AI suddenly will become the singularity. Suddenly it'll decide that in the case of the Matrix, humans need to be batteries, not humans. And it just moves forward without us. And I don't actually think that's what will happen with AI, at least knock on wood, it doesn't. But, we use it in our everyday lives. And it is an invaluable piece of how I operate my life today. And so as you think about it, every technology that we've had that becomes an invaluable piece of how you operate your day also becomes something that threat actors can turn around and use against you to make their day better, right? So that's what we'll hopefully be going over and talking about. We've seen AI have a gradual rise up over the last couple years. And so as I've talked to other CISOs, and I've talked to some people who are actually working in this business, the reason we're saying the threat awakens is because, much like ransomware, the first ransomware came out in 1989. It was the Age Trojan. The demand was $192. If you look at the ransomware industry today, it would be on the Fortune 500 list. It would be at about Fortune 300, and it's a multi-billion dollar industry. And so this is where I believe AI is today. We're seeing the first uses of threat actors probing around with it and playing and seeing how it's going to work. But we haven't seen them really dive after it like I think we'll start to see. 2025 is probably not the year of AI threat actors, but 26 will be, 27 it will get worse, and 28 it will be in full force. So I was watching The Matrix this weekend with my daughter to get a refresher on it. And the great thing about Agent Smith is he didn't just copy likenesses, he copied everything. So if you remember, and if you don't, doesn't really matter, but there was a scene at the end where he shoots the helicopter pilot and then takes over the helicopter pilot, and suddenly he can fly a helicopter, right? Because he took everything from the likeness of the person that he copied. And so this is really what we're starting to see with AI, is I can get so much context around thing in open source intelligence, then I can copy whole personas. In fact, if you saw that Denmark is trying to get a law through right now that is actually protecting your likeness, image, and everything about you. And I'll be curious to see how they go ahead and enforce it, that not only will you have the rights to your likenesses and images and voice, chat, likeness, but also for the 50 years after you die, you will also have rights to it. And then there are also, this is the one I think there will be a challenge, is nobody can use your likeness without your permission, except in the case of satire, which I think is a lot like those pornography cases. Like, how do you judge what satire is? I guess I'll know it when I see it. But it is interesting that we're seeing those laws come along, right? So a little bit about ourselves. I think that we had a good intro. I won't go in depth about it. But even though I run a cybersecurity consulting firm now, I have actually sat in the chair, so I do understand the challenges that you've gone through. Jim is, been in this industry for a long time, so he has a lot of expertise to come and talk about what we're going to talk about today. And so what we're going to go over is what is AI impersonation? What are the totally different flavors that we have around it? And there's a lot of different flavors of it. And talk a little bit about How's it evolved? What does an attack, a real life attack, actually look like? And then I'll turn it over to Jim, because mine's the easy part. He'll talk about how we defend for tomorrow and the day after. And so, AI now can mimic faces, voices, writing styles, and all in real time. So if you remember the very first, deep fakes that I saw, I remember the one is where, Tom Cruise flippantly takes off his glasses and suddenly you replace it with your face. It's that famous scene from Top Gun, and wow, it looks really cool, and I'll use it as an animated gift. But it didn't happen in real time. You had to submit it. It would generate it for it and all this. Now what we're seeing is all these things are happening at machine speed. So I can actually speak to a machine and it will create the deep fake and go in real time. And so I just recently had done a podcast with Sage, who is the CEO, who was originally going to speak with me today. And this was the first 2 minutes of the podcast with Sage speaking, but it wasn't Sage speaking. It was one of his engineers doing this deep fake. And you wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. And so we're seeing a lot of tools come out to detect this, but it is a real thing where we didn't really have to worry about that before. So you saw, some little glimpses of this coming, but it was mainly impersonation, not something this sophisticated. In fact, talking with a lot of financial institutions, and if you've not ever listened to the Lazarus Project podcast, I highly suggest it. It's very good. But a lot of financial institutions now are finding that Korean nationals are getting jobs in American companies. Number one, just to supplement the Korean government, but two, to infiltrate the organizations as well. And they're doing it through this deepfake technology. Right now, I heard one financial institution, the way they're thwarting it is asking the people if they think Kim Jong-il's fat, which they usually cannot respond positively to, and at that time they do it, but I don't think that's a good security control. So now we're having to come up with ways to actually determine, is this feed real or is it fake? They can also sound exactly like your CEO. So this is just a transcript of a conversation that was had. But you saw the bank in Hong Kong where they did deep fake the CEO's voice to the procurement department, and they sent a wire. I think it was $3 million or something like that. Nothing big. But, harkening back to my days in the casino world, when we typically build projects like the project that MGM is building in Okinawa right now, it's an $11 billion project. So somebody calling up and saying, hey, I'm not going to get your I-beams to you on time unless you go ahead and forward me this money, it's a pretty easy fish, right? And now if they can do it with the real voices in real time, it's going to be pretty hard to detect. And so it's something that you're going to have to start helping your companies think about and defend against. Also, because of the amount of open source intelligence that's out there, before where they had to handcraft profiles, they don't have to anymore. What they can do is they can set up LinkedIn profiles, Twitter profiles, Facebook profiles, just by going out and gathering all the open source intelligence that's on you, out there on you in the market. And they can also go and read your company's website, understand the sentiment of how your company thinks, read blogs about people that are doing stuff, and synthesize that and make very creative and very convincing profiles of you and your people. And so, think about why this is important, because when they're doing this, they're able to, so again, back to the Korean doing deep fake, interviews, they create real life LinkedIn profiles that they can back up with their deep fake call. And so it's very hard for people to distinguish what's real and what's not. And I'm sure you've all experienced the LinkedIn profile requests that would like you to invest somewhere in Taiwan or something like that. Like, I get them at least once a month. Not a very sophisticated one, but imagine one that really looked like somebody in your company. Would you say no if you were an executive and somebody who was buried somewhere down in the IT department that you thought was probably one of your people, but you might not know? You'd probably say yes, right? So, and this is how fast it's evolved, right? So this was AI art a year ago, and this is AI art today. If any of you played with it, you know, like we're not generating 7 fingers anymore on people or anything like that. Like the art has gotten really good. And so, you know, with these diffusion models and the way that the LLMs have changed, it used to be that you had to go and use massive compute to get really good outcomes. The models are better, I need less data, and I can get better outcomes. In fact, I've heard a lot of conversations. I heard NVIDIA talking about, you know, putting chips out at the edge, putting chips in robots and all that, where the artificial intelligence can reside right where it needs to. So imagine how commoditized this is going to become for the threat actors to create realistic images for you. And so now we can talk about persuasive, you know, interaction at scale. Right? And so we were actually talking right before the conversation, or right before this talk about, I'd gone to the CISO Academy in Quantico, and they were talking about the chatbots that had come out. They're mainly through like Tinder or, you know, apps like that, but would fool people into giving up information. But there was no context around what they were doing. They would have randomization schemes of how long they would take to respond back to people, and they would ask around questions, and then after the 7th or 8th question, they would start to try to mine personal information. Well, now the LLM, in fact, if you have a Tesla, now you have Gronk in your car, right? If you've ever had a long drive and then had a long conversation with Gronk, it understands the sentiment, and it understands who you're talking to, right? It gets verbal clues from you. It starts to understand your sentiment, and it adapts to what you're thinking. In fact, there was just a survey done in American universities, and it asked a question, a little bit scary question, but it said, could you see yourself falling in love with an AI? And if you really fell in love with it, could you marry it? And 40% of the college students said yes. Because it adapts to you and it follows your verbal clues. And in fact, I get super tired of Gemini telling me all the time, wow, that's a really intelligent question, Scott. I'm glad you asked it. And it's like, it probably wasn't an intelligent question. That's why I asked it, because I didn't know, right? But they follow along this line. So now what's really becoming crazy is you've heard about agentic AI, but now as you take all this open source intelligence and you start doing things like prompt chaining and vector attacking and stuff like that, what you can do, so I'll give you 2 examples. The first one is super easy. When I was at JCPenney, we were one of the first customers of FishMe, which became Cofense, which Jim has a lot of experience with, so he can talk to you about that. But and we had 35% failure rate across our people. And so, in fact, it's funny because somebody was talking about this earlier, and so the executives were like, I want to fire all of them. You know, anybody who failed, it's like, I think this was a training exercise. We probably shouldn't fire them. And so, but it got very heated, and finally the CEO called the meeting and without a conclusion. And so myself and the other, had a meeting, separate meeting with the CEO, and I said, I guarantee you, I could spend 10 minutes per executive and write a phishing email for each one of them, and I would get above a 50% hit rate. Oh, Scott, I don't believe that's the case. Okay, well, here, let me test it. So he let me go ahead and test it. All that I did is went to their LinkedIn profile, got what their name is, saw what university they went to. Then I would pull up any information I could get on them at the university, A lot of them had met their spouses at the university because you could see it through their alumni things. And so, for example, our CEO, his name was Mike Ullman. He went to the University of Cincinnati, and his wife's name was Barbara, but she went by Barbie. And so I said, hey, Mike, I came across this really cool picture of you and Barbie and I in front of Bearcat Stadium on Mission Street in front of the big game that we had that year. I thought you'd get a kick out of it. Hope to see you soon. Thanks, Bob. And so I did one of those for each one of it. 75% of the executives clicked on it, right? So why does that become scary? Well, now imagine I don't have to do that by hand. I can create agentic AI where somebody goes out and gathers open source intelligence, somebody goes and writes the email, somebody goes ahead and sends up follow-up messages, maybe they ask them for a chat through LinkedIn. All of those attack vectors become open. So the second one I'll give is more real life. So we've all heard because of my former friends over at MGM, the scattered spider attack that took down MGM and the ransomware, right? And I was at UKG right after I came on board right after they had their ransomware attack. It was the same group. It was Black Cat that became scattered spider down the road. They fraction every time they do a ransomware attack. And there's a 15-year-old kid sitting in jail in Vegas awaiting trial because he was the guy who did the social that got him into the organization. And this has always been the Achilles heel of the attackers, is they're having to use American-sounding voices to attack the social engineer to get the credentials to get into the organization. Now I can make anybody correct the grammar. I can make them sound like they're from Middle Tennessee or upstate New York just by speaking into a mic. So with that being said, I've done the easy stuff and told you how bad it could all be. And so now I'll turn it over to Jim to tell you how he's going to help you out with it.
Thank you. Hopefully this is on. Yeah. All right. So I'm a lot more cynical because I've spent the last 5 years seeing what happens over and over again inside of customers. I also get to go see and hear the cynicism that organizations have, the lack of coordination between security awareness and the SecOps, or the security operations team, and never the two shall meet, and we don't share data back and forth, and I've got 27 breaches against my name. My CEO has 84. That's every big company with a massive budget across all industries. So that's before AI. So what I see today is this, and really, I nearly left this industry. In fact, I was on my way out because it was just no innovation, no disruption. It was the same thing day, and it was Groundhog Day. And it was the same battle, and it was a level of cynicism that we saw from CISOs to security awareness teams. It was either I'm doing this purely for compliance, which means I wasn't really serious about security, and I don't really appreciate what the actual threat is and what that threat means to the individual who has 27 breaches against his name and gets the notifications that your data's up for sale again. Thank you, Equifax, Experian, AT&T, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on, right? So now, what do we have? We had a nice, clean, call it static, predictable track and where we were going for security awareness. And security awareness was, hey, we got this large content database, we've got an LMS, and we got these templates, and we're just going to train everybody the same way, and we're going to train them based upon indicators of compromise. Bad misspellings, bad logos, the same stuff that gets through the SEGs that are out there today. So we're training people to catch the things the SEGs are still missing. And then came the next industry, which was the post-SEG market. So that's technology behind the secure email gateway to catch the stuff the secure email gateway missed. But we're still training people based upon what indicators of compromise and what we're doing. So we're literally wondering why we're not getting any better at it, which then creates a cynicism around does security awareness training even work? And we finally, it seems that it's starting to happen now, that we've now recognized, oh my God, ChatGPT, or OpenAI, just created the most prolific and powerful cyber warfare weapon we've ever known. And everybody's sitting around doing the same training we used to do before. And it's not about the training, it's not about technology. It's got to be 3 pillars. If you want a successful program and you want to really empower that first line of defense, which is the people, then you got to look at the psychology of it, because that's what this is. It's psychology, and AI just made it incredibly more powerful. So, is it the green button? Yeah, okay, thank you. So I say this because we talked about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we came out with SEGs. Then we said, okay, the SEG's still missing stuff, but we got to do some security awareness training. And then we had the post-SEG, and then we had the AI introduction in the post-SEG world that was great because it's defending against IOCs, which, what are IOCs? They're attacks that we already know about. That's it. We've already seen them, so we can then create a rule set, and that's why we miss 20 to 40% of the attacks that come in. It only requires one. In 2024, a human-written phish was 25% more effective than anything a computer could do. By March of 2025, it completely flip-flopped. AI, generative AI, 25% more effective. Anybody who went to the Gartner event 3 months ago, Deloitte, $70 billion in losses by 2027 because of generative AI or AI-based phishing. $70 billion of the losses. And what are we doing today? What are the incumbents doing today? Still training the same way. So that brings us to what's actually happening right now. What did OpenAI, what did artificial intelligence deliver? It delivered a large language model. It delivered generative AI. That large language model can go out there and pull in all my 27 breaches of my dark web data. It can go out to LinkedIn, GitHub, and every social media thing I've posted out there and learn about me. Then it can create a persona and persistently attack me. Not just over email, where most people are focused, but if you saw what the FBI just posted recently, about 2-3 weeks ago, is the level of sophistication of the attacks. It's social engineering now. And it's now autonomous. And we've given all of our data, inadvertently, intentionally or unintentionally, we've given all of our data. So we can now go pull in all of my information I've posted on LinkedIn and Facebook and everything else. It can go out there and collect open source intelligence on all my dark web breaches. So you can go get all my social security number, my everything. And then it learns about me. Now all I got to do is go out to YouTube or anybody else out there, any video you've posted, and I can go create a deep fake of your voice or a deep fake of your video or both. And now I can take what I've learned about you, combined with a persona and your deep fake, and by the time you realize that it's not me, you've just transferred out $25 million across 3 different transactions if you're an engineering firm in the UK. You don't even know it. So what's the attack? What's changed about the attack vector? I can either continue this approach of technology is going to stop everything. And I've heard it all, seriously. Oh, we're getting rid of passwords. How is that going to stop phishing attacks? How is that going to stop social engineering? So now what we're seeing now is the speed that this is moving is terrifying. It's terrifying for me because of the fact that you can't control it. You're being held to compliance requirements and laws and governance. The threat actors, they can just go take all this, stick it. You don't even have to be technical anymore. I can just go download it, educate it, or buy attack as a service, right? So now we've moved to this space now to where suddenly the speed and the sophistication of the attacks, the autonomous nature, is suddenly at the point to where technology can't fix this. It can't be your only line of defense. So as I talk through this, we're huge advocates for 3 things. Technology is a piece of it. That's one of the pillars. But your culture and your policy inside your organization plays as big a role as the technology does. And I've seen it where I've gone and had conversations with certain sectors that say the same thing. Oh, this is amazing technology, but you know what? We couldn't use that because we have to fire people after they failed 3 breaches. That's a negative culture. Every piece of data set says a negative culture is less successful in engagement and the success of an awareness program than a positive, team-based, positive reinforcement culture. And so we'll talk about that. So as I go through this, so why do we fall for it? And this is the kind of, think about this from a warfare perspective. PsyOps, what are they playing to? They're playing to the human condition, the human behavior, how we've all been conditioned from birth through our work world, right? So cognitive shortcuts. We all use cognitive shortcuts. Everybody familiar with cognitive shortcuts? Cognitive biases. We need to move quick. What are cognitive shortcuts for? Simplification and efficiency. How do you get simplification? You skip over the details, or you minimize the details, right? Efficiency. I need to make a decision fast. So I've skipped over the details. I'm making a fast decision. So what have I relegated myself to in most cases? An emotional decision, no logic. We lack self-awareness. We lack the understanding of a policy. So if my corporate policy, if I knew that and I understood that in terms of how we transfer money, how we do two-factor authentication, if we understood the policy and we had a reinforcement culture that allows organizations and individuals within the organization to challenge and doubt and ask questions and verify versus being forced to quickly. It's productivity. We got to get things done really fast. That's our problem. So if I'm a threat actor and I want to come after you, I can go buy a boatload of technology and I can keep hammering your defensive perimeter, or I go after the soft target, your people. Why not get your person? I'll get you. You transfer me the money. I didn't even have to do it. I left no breadcrumbs. You did it because I can play against your biases and you as an individual. And all your data's out there. So I know your cultural tendencies. I know what your background is. I know that generally I can create a persona to go attack that. So as we go into it, if you think about those cultural shortcuts, and I'm trying to get myself to speed and simplicity, what do I have to do to leverage? I leverage my cultural biases, my authority bias, my availability heuristics. So you don't know you're doing them, but you're not even training people to recognize that's what they're doing. So again, context and self-awareness. People need to understand, not be treated like victims and said, hey, look for this misspelling, look for that logo. The technology's doing that. How about some self-awareness that's supported by a policy and a culture that says we actually need to recognize the way we work, change the way we work, and allow people to challenge. So authority bias, very easy. There's a lot of biases, and I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. But then take an authority bias or take an anchor bias that says, hey, I'm only going to lock in on the first thing, and that is, you're the CFO, and you just asked me to transfer money. Geez, and then you're my authority. Now I'll put some urgency on it. And you don't know the policy, and your culture doesn't really allow you to go back and question your CFO, guess what? There goes $25 million if you're that engineering firm. And guess what? No technology in the world would have stopped that. No getting rid of passwords, no all the other things we're looking at. The speed things are moving at right now is terrifying for me. There are 2 companies right now we work with that are doing deep fake detection for Zoom meetings. We're seeing it in Zoom meetings. We're seeing it in Teams meetings. We're seeing it in WebEx, for those of you who still use WebEx. They're coming in with deep fake and voice and getting you to transact and do something and give up information. The technology will help, but that technology is so nascent right now, the speed and the attack vectors and the threats and the tactics and the techniques keep evolving. Yet we're still out here talking about email phishing, when what's actually happening is it's WhatsApp, it's SMS, it's deepfake video, it's deepfake voice. But what's more importantly, it's social engineering. It's what data we've given them and what they can, without any limitations, use against us. Only way you do that is you educate. All right, so how do we defend ourselves? Some of this is a bit repetitive because I jumped ahead a little bit. But obviously, as you can see, you got to train the human firewall. But the way we train today is not the way we got to train for the current threats that are happening today, right? We can't train people to look for misspellings and bad grammar and bad logos and look for the domain name. Yeah, we all got that, although there are still people who click on stuff. But that typically comes back to cognitive shortcuts. So let's start to think about how we train and how we make people more self-aware and critical thinking, supported by a policy, clearly articulated policy for probably some of the biggest risks in an organization, such as transferring money, intellectual property, other things like that. Combine that with a culture that allows us to question, that doesn't penalize us for making a mistake, but actually puts us back into training and helps remediate. Now, if somebody continues doing the same stupid thing 10 times, yeah, you're going to have to get HR involved at some point. There is a challenge you got to deal with. But you have to have this ability to train and evolve the training, but you can evolve the training requires a strong foundation of a policy and a culture that supports that evolution. I was on an investor call this week. I was just telling Scott about it. And she was a former CISO of Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. And her comment to me was, I'm really cynical. I got a love-hate relationship with security awareness training. And I said, why? And she said, because all my C-suite want to fire everybody. I said, yeah, they're the most vulnerable. Because they're the, as you heard from Scott, they're the ones that is easier to trick because everything's fast, 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 fast. That lends itself to cognitive shortcuts and biases and making very quick decisions. So verifying through multiple channels, avoiding that react fast, again, getting more into the culture. Applying practical safeguards, multi-factor everywhere. Callbacks on sensitive requests. Don't trust video and voice. It should be okay not to trust video and voice. If you are sitting in a call, a Zoom call, and that looks suspicious, we all have Slack. Oh my God, we all have a lot of Slack, a lot of messaging platforms. It takes 2 seconds to say, is this you on the call? We're even seeing, to Scott's point, the North Korean case. We saw that. That one's been around for a while. But there's even this approach of asking them to put their hand across their face. Have you guys heard of that one? So if you got a video and you think it's suspect because it's a bit jittery, the lips maybe, what do they call that again? Uncanny valley, when their lips don't match the voice. And they'll say, hey, put your hand across your face. And this one's been on TikTok and YouTube and everything else for a while. That is going away. That video that you saw, well, it was actually a clip of a video of Sage. We did that on our team call. And we said, Sage, put your, it actually was Matt. Matt, put your hand across your face. It didn't mess up the video. The speed at the technology and the deep fake is moving way faster than the techniques used to understand whether it's a real or not real video. And there's a couple of approaches. There's using LLMs to try to discern whether that's a real video, whether it's asymmetrical, in other words, a real static video or a static voicemail, versus a symmetrical approach where you're having a dialogue. And can you recognize that? And how quickly can you recognize it and notify somebody? So that's in its nascent stages. We're seeing that. Everybody's seen the State Department one, and the DoD is dealing with it pretty regularly. But we're now seeing it in financial services. And financial services, through meetings, getting access to meeting links and entering those meetings. So this changes how you think and how you look at the entire threat in terms of the tactics, techniques, and approaches coming in. Then it's like, how do you build the muscle memory, right? This is why we look at security awareness training. There's a training component, which I think I've maybe beaten the dead horse on that one. What is simulations about? Simulations is about reinforcing the learning. It's not about tricking. But it's showing you real-world attacks and intervening when you make the mistake, annotating that email, and then telling you these are the things, it's that reinforcement training. And then being able to run this with contemporary threats, being able to run this on a regular basis. So that muscle memory is built, and the reason I bring that up, because I'm surprised how many people I've heard in the industry say, well, you do one or the other. Well, no, you don't just train and then do a training a year later. Training without reinforcement is forgotten within about 15 minutes. We've all gone through the insider trading every year. If you go that many times, now you can just let it run in the background and answer the same questions that you answered the previous year. But the tactics here change by the week. The threats change by the week. What works one week, they'll change very quickly the next week. All right, so continuing to build this muscle memory, playbooks, routine simulations. In many cases, we would see this approach of, hey, well, we have a 6% click rate, but we don't believe it. Well, I wouldn't believe it either, because you put real-world attacks with deep fake, and we'll blow that up to about 25 to 30% click rate. Click rate's not that important. It's, are you engaged? Are people reporting it? It's reporting that defines whether or not people are engaged. People report when the culture supports them to report it. Doesn't, you get these, oh, well, somebody reported, but they were wrong. So what? But the people who are right are not, if they're not reporting, they're not engaged. So how do you build that cyber-first culture where it's a team? Everybody understands why we're doing it, what are the tactics being used against you. That helps you in terms of professional development the rest of your career. It doesn't have to be simply another cybersecurity training. You're learning something new about the art of the psychology of the attack, right? How many people go through security awareness training and actually get into cognitive biases and cognitive shortcuts? If people understand they're doing it, then they become more self-aware. Then they become much more effective in terms of how they defend. Okay, and then I don't know how much time I have, but I'm going to try to wrap it up here. Modern technology stacks. All right, yeah. We heard it, automation, deploying AI. We're going to see this, and I would encourage people to just explore what the AI, the agentic AI approach, and other AI solutions, because the speed that this is coming at means you can't have humans trying to do this, solve this problem for you in the SOC. You've got to be able to leverage technologies that can identify it and flag it. Humans can be in the loop, but the speed this is moving, the integration, the touch points, the threat surfaces that they're coming at you means you have to have more of a holistic view. So the ability, obviously zero trust, you've got deploying AI detection tools and flagging deep fakes. These are things that are literally starting to happen today in the evolution of this technology. And we're seeing the companies, startups, earlier stages, we'll continue to see this deep fake detection approach. We actually partner ourselves. We partner with the United States Air Force for both offensive and defensive purposes, and then we get to take that into the commercial market. So, Jay, what we are doing, and that was my one pitch, is we are delivering to you the same tactics, techniques, and threats that they're using against you. We're giving you those same things, but to train, to reinforce, and to educate you. So we have a large language model. We pull in OSINT data. We dynamically generate a unique email for everybody in your organization. So there is no more prairie dogging. There is no more of this. I got the email. Did you get the email? We all know the email after about the first 3 people get it. So prairie dogging's dead. Now everybody gets their own special email. So the adversaries, and it's all becoming autonomous. This is my point around the AI. This is my point around looking at your architecture and your program from both the humanistic perspective in terms of the psychological aspect of it, while leveraging technology to help automate and scale the defenses. And then I think we're probably 3 to 5 years where we're going to get to a stage where we're going to start delivering offensive technologies, where we know where the attack is coming from, and we're going to go shut down the attack, as opposed to continue to take the punches, continuing to build this kind of walled defense that just takes its hits, and then you go over the fence and you go straight to the people and you hit the soft targets. Now, how do you identify, because it's not hard to identify where things are coming from. Then you identify it, then you go out and you shut it down. And that's partly why we do you see our booth out there, and it says, the DoD uses us, so should you, and that's part of our joint development with them. So security shifts from static to dynamic. That's the mindset. If there's anything that you kind of take away and you walk away from, is nothing is static. The old way of doing stuff is very quickly going to lead to more and more breaches, more and more nation state, more and more ransomware. The pace that it's coming at is like you said, I don't have to know it. I don't know how to build a large language model and populate it. I can literally go into the dark web and buy attack as a surface with a large language model, feed it OSINT, create a persona, and go after you. Doesn't require a lot, but that means it requires you all to be prepared and know that that's coming and have that in your mind in terms of as you build your programs, as you build your strategies and your defenses in terms of this threat. So, lastly, key takeaways. AI, obviously, impersonating traditional defenses aren't going to stop it. They haven't stopped it. We know this. I've been in this space for a while. If they stopped it, we wouldn't be having these conversations. We wouldn't be having a post-seg product. We wouldn't, the segs would be solving the problem for us. Trust is now a vulnerability vector. People can't be so trusting, unfortunately. That's the way the world is. And it doesn't mean you can't trust people. It means you need to question, and you need to be allowed to question. And then, of course, the solution, as far as we're concerned, is AI native defenses plus human readiness. You've got to train your people the right way with the right policy, clearly articulated, clearly defined policy, and a culture that supports the technology and the ability to train, reinforce, question, push back, and so on and so forth. So that is all I had. And then if you want, that's our booth.
How about a round of applause for
Hopefully that was
for Jim and
a
Scott?
little bit different.
We got time for 2 questions. Going once, twice, done. Oh,
Nope.
Question.
So I like what you guys are talking about with the cultural aspect as a defense mechanism. And I understand the concept of the technology can't solve anything. It can't solve everything.
Right.
But how do you, if you've got that culture, because my organization has that culture that you can question, and we haven't had a bad wire transfer go out in a while. So that's good stuff, right?
Yeah.
How do you deal with the fact that even there, because we're still dealing with things like credential theft, how do you deal with the increasing gap that keeps going on between the technical sophistication of the attack and what can be done with these things that they don't see? Because they understand wire transfers.
Yeah.
They got that.
Yeah.
They don't understand what is my username, what is my password, what is my MFA, what actually is that, and what can be done with that. And the sophistication keeps growing, and the more tools we add, the more sophisticated the attacks become. And the technical knowledge base for the average person in accounting and everything else, the business side of things, that we absolutely have to have, but that they can't spend all of their time learning the technical side that cybersecurity knows.
Right.
How do we address that gap?
So what we are seeing in a lot of these cases is custom. They want to build a training program with custom content specifically for that end user, their circumstances, and getting it, and not training on, hey, this is a credential phish, and a credential phish is when they steal this, and then you go on, and it goes right out the window as soon as you move on because you don't care about it. But understanding what the impact of a credential phish on the organization is and why they go after that. And I think this is when I said at the beginning, I'm not a big fan of treating people like they're victims. Give them the information. Explain to them why they're trying to hit you with that and what the end result is to the organization and why that's so important. Because there's a great. I worked at Cisco in the UK for 11 years, 12 years, and I got these kind of leadership coaches. And she said one of them hit me with a sledgehammer with this one, which was, force wins battles, knowledge wins arguments, collaboration wins commitment. And until people are they're collaborating and they understand the impact that has to the organization, and you've explained the end result and how that impacts the organization and then how that impacts everybody else's job, then they're invested because they understand it. And I think there's too much of this I'll use the same analogy and say, the force is your technology. The knowledge is old school security awareness training. Let me train you on what a credential phish is, what spear phishing is. The collaboration, to me, comes into the fact that they understand the problem, the business aspect of the problem, not the technical aspect of the problem.
And to follow up on that, I think one of the things, so I think back to, usually when I started as a CISO and as an organization, the very first people I would visit was the C-suite admins. Because they had all the passwords to all, and they were usually not very technical. Like they knew all the word processing programs and all that, but they weren't like great techies, right? And I'd have a conversation with them. And then too, if you've ever worked in a multicultural organization, like in the US, we feel free to tell, oh, you're a VP, like whatever, I've never heard of you. Like, why don't you come visit me, or I'll go find somebody and ask a question before I do it. In Asia, that'll never happen. If somebody has a higher authority level than me, I just do. So back to, let's use the same things that the threat actors are using against us. Hey, I understand the culture, I understand the person, I understand their biases. Let me train them with those things in mind so the training can be much more personalized and targeted at what is going to make them the most vulnerable. And how do I help them fix that? Right, and again, what I love is, in fact, I like hearing you say it, because that was one of my stats on my board decks. It wasn't how often did we fool people in phishing, it was how often did people report when we sent out a phishing campaign. Because then I know they're engaged, right? And hopefully everybody would, right? But it was never quite that good, but we did have it in some high numbers as time went on, so it was good. So I think, we can use this, again, technologies are always two-sided.
Yeah.
Everything that you can do bad with it, you can do good with it too. So we should use the same techniques the threat actors are using, just in reverse.
I also find that most CISOs struggle with having that conversation around let's call it the PsyOps approach to phishing, because that points to the problem. If a CISO or CEO or CFO says, Jesus, they're now coming at me leveraging social media and social engineering, you're not going to turn around and tell your CISO to fire everybody, because you're going to get fired, because it's coming after you first, because you're the easier targets. So some of this is having this type of a conversation with the CISO and the board, so they understand the problem and they understand the speed at which the problem moves, the attack moves, the attack surface moves. We came out, it was all email, it was dynamic, where, hey, we got OSINT, email. And then suddenly financial services companies are saying, that's great, but we'd like you to do an automated AI voice call into my contact center to see if you can pull information out of it. Okay, so we went and built that. Do SMS. Now, that was literally 4 months ago. And now it's like, well, now we need you to do WhatsApp, because that's where all the attacks are coming from. And if you're going to Europe, nobody cares about SMS. It's all WhatsApp.
Yep.
All the attacks are coming
Same
from
with
WhatsApp.
Asia.
So yeah, so the speed that things are moving, it doesn't matter if it's email. Email's great. It's still coming. It's still going to always come. But you have nothing to defend yourself against the social engineering with voice, video, messaging platforms. There's no defenses there. You're just hoping to hell that your people are smart enough not to take the phone call and then go transfer the money. That's literally where we are right now. Our strategy is a hope strategy.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you guys. Thank you for staying
Thank you.
late.
Round of
I
applause.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.